She was only a teenager. She had no military training, no noble title, and no army of her own. Yet within a single year, Joan of Arc transformed a losing war, inspired an entire nation, and changed the course of French history forever. France was exhausted by generations of conflict. Cities had fallen, nobles were divided, and many believed the kingdom was close to collapse. Then, from a small farming village, a young girl stepped into the center of history. She claimed that heavenly voices had given her a mission: save France, lift the Siege of Orléans, and bring the Dauphin to Reims for coronation. To some, she seemed impossible. To others, she became a sign that hope had returned. Soldiers followed her banner into danger. A frightened court listened to her words. Enemies feared the morale she brought to the battlefield. Her life would be brief, dramatic, and tragic, but her impact would echo for centuries. This is the remarkable story of Joan of Arc, the teenage hero who saved France. Her story is also different from many other champions in this series. Joan did not rise through a lifetime of campaigns, royal marriages, or imperial conquest. She appeared suddenly, at a moment when France needed more than strategy. It needed a reason to believe the war could still be won. That is why her banner mattered as much as any sword. To understand Joan, we must first understand France on the brink. The 100 Years' War had dragged on for decades, drawing England and France into a long struggle over land, crowns, and legitimacy. By the early 15th century, the French position looked desperate. Much of northern France was under English control or allied with Burgundy. Paris was not safely in the hands of the Dauphin Charles. The French crown was weakened by civil war, political rivalry, military defeat, and the memory of catastrophe at Agincourt. Castles changed hands. Towns negotiated survival. Soldiers and civilians alike had grown used to uncertainty. England supported the claim of young Henry VI, while Charles, the disinherited Dauphin, struggled to prove that he was the rightful king of France. Many people wondered whether the kingdom could survive at all. France did not need only more soldiers. It needed confidence, unity, and a symbol powerful enough to make defeat feel reversible. Then, from a small farming village on the frontier, an unlikely hero emerged. The crisis was not only military, it was psychological. Defeat had taught many French towns to expect English success and Burgundian pressure. Every lost fortress made resistance feel more dangerous. Every uncertain noble weakened the Dauphin's claim. Joan entered a world where legitimacy itself was contested, and where a single victory could have meaning far beyond its walls.
Joan was born around 1412 in Domrémy, a village in northeastern France. She was raised in a peasant family, surrounded by fields, animals, village labor, church bells, and the anxieties of war. She had little formal education and probably could not read or write in the way nobles and clerics did. But she was deeply religious, and her faith shaped how she understood the world. Around the age of 13, Joan later said she began experiencing visions and hearing voices that she believed came from saints. According to her testimony, these voices instructed her to live virtuously and eventually to help save France. Modern historians cannot verify the spiritual experience itself, but they can see its historical consequence. Joan became convinced that she had a mission, and that conviction gave her extraordinary courage. For a teenage village girl to approach captains, nobles, and princes was almost unthinkable. Yet Joan did not act as if history belonged only to the powerful.
She believed she had been called, and that belief pushed her toward the royal court. Domrémy sat near zones affected by the conflict, so Joan's childhood was not isolated from war. Stories of raids, burned villages, displaced families, and divided loyalties formed the background of ordinary life. Her faith gave structure to that fear. Whatever modern readers believe about her voices, Joan herself acted with total seriousness, as if obedience to her mission mattered more than safety.
Joan's journey to the Dauphin was dangerous. She had to cross territory threatened by enemies and doubters before reaching Chinon, where Charles held court. She requested an audience, and the request itself was extraordinary. A peasant girl claiming a divine mission wanted to speak with the man who hoped to be king. According to later accounts, Charles tested her by disguising himself among the crowd, but Joan identified him. Historians debate the details of this famous scene, yet the broader truth remains. The meeting changed her life. Charles and his advisors did not simply hand her an army without caution. She was examined by churchmen and questioned about her faith, her purpose, and her claims. In a desperate moment, Joan offered something the court badly needed: hope linked to action. She insisted that Orléans could be saved and that Charles must go to Reims for coronation. Whether Charles saw her as a miracle, a symbol, or a political opportunity, he allowed her to join the effort. France had found a banner around which frightened soldiers could rally. The court at Chinon was not simply impressed by enthusiasm. It needed proof that Joan would not become an embarrassment or a danger. Her examination helped transform a village girl into an authorized symbol. Armor, banner, escort, and royal permission gave her public legitimacy. From that point forward, Joan was no longer only a believer with a message. She was part of the political theater of France's survival. The Siege of Orléans became Joan's first great test. The city had been under pressure for months, and its fall would have opened the road deeper into French territory. English fortifications surrounded key approaches. Morale was fragile. Joan arrived carrying a white banner and a message of confidence. Her role was not that of a modern general drawing every movement on a map, but her presence changed the emotional atmosphere of the army. She urged action, encouraged attacks, and inspired soldiers who had grown accustomed to caution. During the fighting, Joan was wounded by an arrow, yet she returned to the battlefield. That moment became central to her legend. The teenage girl who would not leave while France's fate hung in the balance. In May 1429, the English siege was lifted. The victory at Orléans transformed French morale. It proved that English momentum could be broken. It made Joan famous. More importantly, it made the Dauphin's cause feel alive again. For France, Orléans was more than a military success. It was the return of belief. Orléans became a test of will. The English had strong positions, but the French now had a figure who made hesitation feel like betrayal. Joan's banner did not kill enemies by itself, but it changed what soldiers thought was possible. Courage can spread through an army like fear does. At Orléans, Joan helped replace fear with momentum, and momentum became victory.
After Orléans, Joan urged speed. She believed the next step was clear. Charles had to reach Reims, the traditional place of French coronation. The campaign that followed moved with startling momentum. Towns along the route surrendered or opened their gates. French confidence grew with each success, while English and Burgundian authority appeared less inevitable. Joan's banner became a visible sign that the political weather had changed. In July 1429, Charles entered Reims. There, in the great cathedral, he was crowned King Charles VII. For Joan, this coronation fulfilled a central part of her mission. For France, it gave sacred and political legitimacy to a king whose future had once seemed uncertain. The war was not over, and the English were not defeated everywhere, but the psychological balance had shifted. Joan had helped turn a struggling prince into an anointed king. Across France, soldiers and civilians saw that recovery was possible. Her influence extended beyond battlefield tactics. She restored the imagination of victory. Reims mattered because medieval kingship needed ritual. A crown placed in the right cathedral could turn a contested claimant into a sacred monarch in the eyes of many subjects. Joan understood the power of that image. The journey to Reims turned battlefield success into political legitimacy, and it gave Charles something English propaganda could not easily erase: the public ceremony of kingship.
France began to recover, but Joan's position became more difficult after Reims. Victories had made her famous, but they also created political complications. Some leaders wanted negotiation, others wanted caution, and Joan continued to favor bold action. Her presence inspired soldiers and civilians, yet not every commander accepted her judgment. In 1430, she moved to defend Compiègne, a town threatened by Burgundian forces allied with England. During the fighting, Joan was caught outside the gates as they closed. Burgundian troops captured her. It was a turning point as dramatic as Orléans. The young woman who had carried France's hopes into battle was now a prisoner. She was eventually handed over to the English, who understood that destroying Joan's reputation could damage Charles VII's legitimacy. Her military campaigns were over. Her greatest trial was about to begin. The battlefield had made her a symbol of hope. The courtroom would try to turn that symbol into a warning. Her capture also reveals how fragile a symbol can be. On one day, Joan could make soldiers feel invincible. On another, she could be trapped by the chaos of gates, horses, and retreat. The Burgundians knew her value immediately. A prisoner like Joan was not just a military prize. She was a weapon in the war of morale, faith, and legitimacy.
Joan's trial took place in Rouen under English influence. She was charged with heresy and other religious offenses, including claims connected to her voices, her clothing, and her obedience to church authority. The proceedings were long, intense, and deeply political. Modern historians generally regard the trial as shaped by the needs of England and its allies. If Joan could be condemned as a false visionary, then the coronation she helped secure could be discredited. Yet in questioning, Joan showed remarkable confidence. She was a teenager facing trained clerics, legal pressure, and the threat of death. But many of her answers were careful, intelligent, and courageous. She defended the sincerity of her mission without surrendering the core of her identity. The trial records remain among the most extraordinary documents of the Middle Ages because they preserve, however imperfectly, the voice of a young woman confronting the machinery of power. Her enemies wanted humiliation. What they created was testimony. The trial tried to control the meaning of Joan's life. Questions were designed not only to discover facts, but to trap her into statements that could be used against her. Yet her responses often frustrated her judges. She insisted that her loyalty to God and to the mission she believed she had received could not simply be rewritten by political enemies.
In 1431, Joan was executed in Rouen. She was about 19 years old. The scene became one of history's most powerful symbols of sacrifice and conviction. For her enemies, the execution was meant to end her influence. In the short term, it removed a dangerous symbol from the war. But in the longer story of France,
it failed completely. Joan's memory did not disappear. 25 years later, a retrial ordered under Charles VII reviewed the original proceedings and overturned the verdict. Joan was declared innocent. Centuries later, in 1920, she was canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. The reversal after death became part of her legend, condemned by politics, vindicated by history. Her story carried sorrow, but also transformation. The girl who had been dismissed by many as impossible became a national heroine of France, a symbol of courage, faith, endurance, and patriotic resolve. The memory of Joan grew because her death seemed to reveal the injustice of the world around her. A powerless young woman had faced kings, captains, judges, and armies, and she had changed all of them. The later retrial did more than clear her name. It allowed France to claim her openly as a heroine, rather than a condemned prisoner.
Joan of Arc's legacy stands between history and legend. Some details of her visions cannot be verified by historians. Her exact military role is still debated. She was not a conventional commander in the modern sense, but her influence on morale, politics, and the tempo of events is well documented. She inspired soldiers, pushed leaders toward action, and helped make Charles VII's coronation possible. She never ruled a kingdom, commanded armies for decades, or built an empire. Yet in just 2 extraordinary years, she altered the course of one of Europe's longest wars. Artists, soldiers, saints, revolutionaries, and patriots have all found meaning in her life. Few figures have achieved so much in so little time. Joan became France's greatest heroine through faith and determination. But our next champion conquered England in one decisive campaign, forever changing the language, culture, and history of Britain. Next time, we tell the story of William the Conqueror, the king who changed England forever. That is why Joan's greatness cannot be measured only by territory captured or enemies defeated. Her power was inspirational, symbolic, and political. She made a defeated kingdom imagine itself chosen, capable, and alive. Her life asks a difficult question. Can courage be so concentrated in one person that it changes the fate of a nation? In Joan's case, history suggests that it can.